Hi, I am Robert from Melapress. Every year we run a WordPress Security Survey to get a better understanding of the state of security of the WordPress websites that there are online. The survey gives us valuable data on how site owners, developers, agencies, and the likes are approaching security and what's working and what's not, basically. This year we got 264 responses from a number of live events such as virtual summits, WordCamp Europe, YouTube paid promotion, email newsletters, and similar sources. In terms of audience, we have 100 plus of these respondents have more than 10 years experience with WordPress, and all the others have at least 2 years experience, and they all have jobs varying from developers, business owners, agency owners, designers, and similar. But yeah, the numbers alone don't always tell the full story, and that's why today we brought together 4 respected security professionals from the WordPress community. And the goal is to dive a bit deeper in the survey results to ask why some of these numbers look the way they do. You can view the full survey results at melapress.com/survey. Before we jump into the discussions, let's see who the guests are. First of all, thank you everyone for participating in this discussion. Let's start with John. Can you give us a short introduction about yourself, John?
Sure. Thanks, Robert. Hi, everyone. I'm John Blackbourn. I work at HumanMade as the Director of WordPress Security. Primarily, that role means I work as the team lead for the WordPress core security team. And I've been involved with the project for, I don't know, too many years, 18 years, something like that. That doesn't mean I'm going to fix all your problems and make your website secure. It just means I try and manage some people who try to do that.
That's a good disclaimer, because I'm sure all of us have been asked this question quite a couple of times. Oliver?
Yeah, hello everyone. Happy to be here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Patchstack. What we do is we find vulnerabilities in plugins and help companies who run WordPress websites to mitigate them as fast as possible. And yeah, my own background comes, I think, from 10 years ago already in WordPress. Actually started from auditing websites in different domain spaces, identifying already compromised websites, helping companies to clean everything up, and then ultimately landing where we are today, trying to kind of sort out the root cause of why all of this is happening. So that's it.
Interesting. Akshat?
Yeah. Hi, Robert. Again, thanks for having me. So I'm Akshat. I'm the founder of Block Malcare. I've been in WordPress for over 15 years now. We started as a backups company, and we saw that websites would get hacked, and security being such a major problem in WordPress. And that's where we decided that there is a need to address this problem in a good way. And that's how we got headfirst into WordPress and into security, and that brings me here.
Exactly. Nice, thanks. And yeah, Francesco?
Hi everybody, my name is Francesco Carlucci. Thanks for having me. I've been working as a WordPress expert on Codable.io since 2017, and I used to write a lot of custom WordPress code, especially backend code, integration, and then I started finding more and more vulnerabilities, getting more into WordPress security. And nowadays, I'm just an independent security researcher. I research vulnerabilities by myself. I produce some write-ups, and I run custom security audits from companies who contact me.
Nice, very interesting. Thanks, everyone. So yeah, let's dive in with the first question. From the survey results, we can see that 64% of the respondents have experienced at least one security breach, which is quite a high number. Like, are you surprised with this number, and why? Who wants to start? I don't know. John, we can start. Yeah.
It does sound like a high number, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
I guess we need to really clarify what a breach includes. So reading through the survey, you've distinguished between a breach versus like a full site takeover. Did you want to just briefly cover that?
Good point. In fact, to be honest, the actual number was much higher. It was 96%, because we also asked people if they've ever kind of seen or clicked at least once on phishing emails or stuff like that. Now, it depends which angle you look at that. Technically, it's not exactly a breach. However, like for some security companies, the fact that a phishing email made it through all their filters and stuff is also considered as a breach, because there are services actually which help companies like filter emails out or train their employees to make sure they can recognize. So technically, that is the first one. So that's not, if we include phishing emails and this kind of like low-hanging fruit type, that's 96%. However, we remove those and we moved more at least like a hack, an account hijack, like where there was an actual exploitation kind of thing.
Full compromise, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, if it was a full website hack or not, but there was some sort of unauthorized access or action. And that is 64%.
Yeah, so I guess if you take that into account, and particularly that the phrase security, encompasses so much that you can quite easily produce a long list of things that would count as a security vulnerability or a security breach, rather, including unauthorized access to your user account. Maybe you've got a weak password on there. Maybe you used a dodgy Wi-Fi network and someone stole your credentials. That's on the user side of things, or on the other side of things, you've got the server security, you've got the network security, you've got the data storage security. There's so many aspects to what we unfortunately tend to just call security. Does encompass so much that when you start looking at it like that, it becomes a little less surprising that in one way or another, so many companies have had some form of security breach, particularly if that includes storage of customer data. Those things unfortunately quite easily leak out to analytics services, all those third-party trackers you've got on the front end of your website. There's a lot of surface attack area that facilitates what we might call a security breach.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think many focus as well, because we're in the WordPress industry, like WordPress as an application. However, as you said, it relies on a whole infrastructure. There's the web server, there's the database server, the OS of the web server, and all the network infrastructure. So there are many more possible entry points of attacks, and the surface area is much bigger. Oliver, what are your thoughts?
My first thought actually was that, well, indeed, it's a high percentage, but also I wonder how many of the people are being compromised while not actually knowing that they're compromised. So maybe this number being, going up in the sense is in somewhat good if they are eventually, basically, if we have the tools available for them to understand that there is a compromise in the first place, right? That's something that we've realized a lot with when working with hosting companies, is that there's a lot of cases, and I'm sure, Akshat, who is, working on the malware scanning side of the things, is if the sites are not being scanned at all, and if there's not security solutions present there to even identify the compromise, that's an issue on its own. So in a way, if this number is going up, and if this number goes up from the behalf of the users who maybe did not know that they are compromised, and now they are becoming aware of this, is I always try to find ways how to look into everything in an optimistic way, right? But maybe this is something that is a lot of those hidden compromises are actually getting surfaced, but also on the other hand, of course, it does show that the prevalence of basically sites being taken over with whatever, either through vulnerabilities or by hijacking administrator accounts and things like that, it's still a big issue in the ecosystem. So this needs to be addressed.
That's a very good point you mentioned, Oliver, because it's true. I've read stories in the past online, even when I was working pre-WordPress, some companies, it took them months, if not years, actually, to realize that there was some sort of leak or something.
I was actually talking to one of the founders of a very well-known host in the States, and something that was a big surprise to me is like, by law, there's some jurisdictions where if you are essentially aware that there is a breach and you are not like dealing with it, then you will get like a legal you're like responsible for negligence, basically. So in some of those cases, hosting companies might not even want to scan the websites for malware, because then they will become responsible for the fact that they know that there is there are all of those compromises, but then they are being basically responsible of sorting it out.
So what they're doing is they're doing this, and everything's okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Good point.
Yeah.
Akshat, what are your thoughts on this one?
So many thoughts on it. But when I first heard the number, I was like, the first thing that crossed my mind was it just feels sad. I actually feel sad that we are okay with so many people, frankly, being compromised, and this is fine, and it's not acceptable.
It's become a bit of a norm kind of thing. Yeah, like
in WordPress, it is too normalized.
We've been
Actually,
desanitized.
cybersecurity, it is too normalized. Like people take cybersecurity to be too like they've just raised their hands. Like, okay, fine, we are done. We cannot do anything about it. And in WordPress specifically, so that's the first thing. Like the first thing that crosses your mind is like such a large number of people say that they've been compromised, and if you go to the thing, they're like, yeah, security is a big concern, but yeah, we are fine about it. Like it's work as normal. So that's the first thing, and especially with Malcare, we see so much malware out there, so much. Like Oliver mentioned, that so much malware which they're just not aware of for months, for years.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Right, and for like they rely on web hosts. They rely on web hosts to find malware for them, and web hosts. Most web hosts don't do good scanning or don't do any scanning. Web hosts which do some scanning do terrible scanning. In fact, again, uh, something which Oliver's their report has other. I think they've published another report recently which shows
it's
the
cool,
state of the art of web host security. It is terrible, to say the least, and we have been saying this for years.
And the big problem there is that at the same time they are saying that we cover the security of all of your websites, and then it actually makes the customers not think about security because they think that they are already covered.
Oh yes, the number one selling point of every web host. And I don't want this to be a bashing point for web hosts, because I do know that it's a precarious situation, right? Because they have certain web hosts get blamed for literally everything. Like they cannot take care of security when someone goes in there and maintains their site in a certain way. But anyways, yeah, so the numbers are really high, and we should be really unhappy about it as an ecosystem. I think that's the one big thought I have. And the other thing I will tell you is, whatever the people have said, my understanding is that you cannot really trust that number, and the reason is people have terrible understanding of security. Just terrible. Yeah. They say X, they mean Y, and what has happened is Z.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. Yeah, especially when you have a lot of non-technical people maintaining websites, it's just kind of expected. Francesco, based on the number of vulnerabilities you found in plugins,
honestly, I was not surprised by that number, and I find myself very in line with what has been said already by Akshat and Oliver as well, because there is a lot of misunderstanding about security, especially because our hosting companies advertise like secure hosting solution. And there is not enough awareness of the fact that security is always like a stack of a shared responsibility model. So you have the physical infrastructure on the bottom, then you have the OS, the database, and all the software underlying. then you have the application, then you have all the user, like data, the passwords. And what most of the website owners or entrepreneurs fail to understand is that you are always in charge of the application layer of security. So what an hosting company can provide is physical security of the server, is maintenance of the web server and the database, a secure connection between the web server and the database, but nobody can take care of the application layer. And that's, like, at least in my experience, like, I don't have a big data set like maybe Akshat or Oliver, because I handle like a few websites per year, but 100% of my hacked website, they fail at the application layer. Whether it's a vulnerable plugin or password phishing, password reuse, they always fail at the application layer. So nowadays, there is a little bit of work by the hosting companies to also provide scanning services, vulnerability plugin notification, which is falling on the application layer. But there is much more to do, like two-factor authentication, account audit. Security is an ongoing process, and owners, entrepreneurs, people that run WordPress, a lot of times they forget this. And that's why they get hacked all the time. They used to justify this by saying, hey, it's WordPress, it gets hacked, but it's not like that.
Yeah, true. Yeah, in fact, to be honest, the next two questions almost kind of like confirm what everyone is saying, that there is a lot of misunderstanding, because yeah, we have such a high percentage of websites getting hacked. However, the second stat was like statistic, only 27% of the respondents have a breach recovery plan or know what they have to do. Actually, if a website gets hacked, what would you do? So yeah, it's kind of like confirms. What do you think, Francesco? It kind of confirms that, no? That people are misunderstanding security, kind of. I think Francesco got frozen. Yeah, let's wait for him, don't worry. Yeah, Francesco, did you hear my last question by any chance? Connection problems.
I can just jump in there.
Yeah, jump in and then we'll go to Francesco. Yeah.
So Francesco used the word...
I got frozen.
No worries, we'll get back to you. Go on, John.
Can you repeat?
Francesco used the word awareness there, which is that's really key. Like that, I think most of the questions you ask about why security vulnerabilities happen and why sites get breached can often come back to the word awareness. In particular, I was having a discussion a few weeks ago on this topic, and I came to the realization that having a self-hosted website is quite an anomaly within the tech stack of a lot of companies. You know, think of all the other software that you self-host as a company. It's not a lot. Some might self-host their email if they're feeling brave, but all the other software we use is SaaS products hosted somewhere else. There's very few that a lot of companies actually manage themselves. So what that creates a situation where quite often a marketing team is responsible for managing a website, and they don't have a dedicated IT team. You would hope that as a company gets larger and they have more IT, that's not the case, but certainly for small and medium-sized businesses, a self-hosted website really is an anomaly in terms of the level of responsibility they have. And then, of course, it comes down to awareness. If that's the only piece of software that they're managing, why would they be aware of all of the requirements around keeping it secure?
Exactly. Yeah. Good point. Francesco, just to recap the question, because you were a bit disconnected. So what we're saying is that, as all of you agree that there's not enough awareness, so people are not exactly sure what's secure and they're not aware what they need to do. In fact, kind of like the second question was the second statistic was something kind of like confirms this, because we said when we ask people like, do you have a breach recovery plan, or do you know what you would do if your website gets hacked? And only 27% of the respondents have some sort of recovery plan that confirms, right?
Yeah, this is understandable because, as I said before, there is no awareness, and so there is no breach recovery plan most of the times. And even when they get hacked, like biggest priority is to become operational again. But when you go talk about the breach recovery plan, the fact that, for example, making backups it's not enough. The backup has to be isolated, has to be tested. So all this procedure, they come at the cost. And for some companies, it's not like easy to see the value of all this, because cost is often associated with something that then can bring you a profit. Like, sad to say, but security, it can bring you profit in a sense, but it's more about protection. So investing like a budget on a breach recovery plan, which it can be intensive, especially on a large infrastructure. It's usually something that is not on the priority list of a company. So the number doesn't surprise me. In this case, I would expect even a lower number, because it's hard, in my experience, to sell a breach recovery plan to a company.
Yeah, 100%. Oliver, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it also goes together a little bit with what we discussed before of like what people are being promised in the ecosystem. I think a lot of there's so many cases where we've talked with agencies, and when you talk about security, they're like, yeah, but why should I care? Like, my hosting already covers it. Like, if you're looking for like top tips of how to secure your website, like, you can find countless number of blog posts that are like, the number one top tip is get the secure hosting provider. And then you go and get this secure hosting provider, and then you realize that every hosting provider is a secure hosting provider. And then ultimately, like, if you're being taught this all the time, that the silver bullet of having a secure website and getting a secure hosting provider is solving all of your problems, then why would you have incident response plan, or what is it even? Because it's not only about hosting companies promising like the website security. WordPress is, I think, the only ecosystem where cleanup is a security feature, which is really funny for me. But WordPress website cleanup is a feature, and I've seen hosting companies who literally advertise this as well, where they're like, with this hosting plan, you will get free malware cleanups, right?
For free, exactly.
Yes. So why would you need any kind of like disaster or recovery plan if you're essentially being promised this left and right everywhere, that whenever a problem arises, then it will magically basically go away. And like Francesco said as well, like the focus is on becoming operational again, but the real work should be on incident response from a kind of investigation point of view. Like, why did this happen in the first place? And there's so many cases where websites are being cleaned up from malware, and then a little, like, I don't know, a week later, something pops back there because the original whatever the entry point was actually not being removed. So it's I think this is a painful problem actually, and ultimately the only thing that helps here is custom, like, it's the awareness. Like, every single security panel I've been to, everything ultimately ends up on like, oh, we need to do more education. But at one point we need to realize that if we are talking about education for 5 years straight, and just like everyone comes back to like, we need to do more education, then maybe the education isn't really like helping in this case, if these numbers are what we are seeing.
Makes sense. Akshat, in fact, how often do you see return users? Because you do more cleanup, not Malcare. So how often do people keep on coming back kind of thing?
So people keep coming back with new sites. That's what happens more and more, because it's just like, you deal with the core of the ecosystem is agencies, and agencies have so many sites. And unfortunately, I'll tell you that the challenge is, we keep blaming the user. The reality is the plugin authors write such rubbish code, and they will patch a vulnerability is found. Then 3 months later, another vulnerability is found in another one of their plugins or in the same plugin. And then we report that a vulnerability is reported. That guy is like, hey, I patched it in 24 hours, I'm so good. No, you're not good. That same vulnerability came in another 24 hours, like in 3 months. What have you changed in your practice since then? Now, what is an agency supposed to do in this case? Like frankly, it's a ecosystem level issue. It's so easy to blame the user. It's so easy to blame the host. It's so easy to blame the plugin author also in this case, because we are not paying the plugin author sufficiently. Because it takes a huge amount. It's very expensive to do this thing. It takes huge skills to do anything security related. It means somebody has to be invested in doing this month on month again. And I know I've slightly digressed, but you will see that everything is related over here, and nothing is happening in isolation. Coming back to the recovery plan, malware scanning is such an important part of recovery plan. Making sure that you have malware scanning as a recovery plan. If actually, let me tell you this: a large number of people who actually say they have recovery plan, and what Francisco said, effectively think that they have a backup in place, or they have a host who will, like Oliver said, who will clean up the website. And neither of them is a recovery plan, simply because your website host, your web host, even if they clean up the website, because the reality is you still need it cleaned up, and that's a recovery. Like, uh, should you have a database which has high availability? Yes. Do you still require a recovery plan? Yes. Okay, so you still require backups, you still require a recovery plan. You need database systems, your systems to have higher availability. So you always need a good recovery plan in place. Do you require good malware scanning, good malware cleanups? Yes. But what people are relying on is, oh, I have a good backup, I'll recover, restore from that. And unfortunately, the number of articles out there which tell you that, hey, if you get hacked, restore from a backup.
Yes,
Do you
that's
know
good.
which backup to restore from? You don't, because you don't have a good malware scanner in place. How did you learn that you have been hacked? Google told you that you have been hacked.
And you would also lose data, by the way, if the website
Yeah.
makes like it has high activity. So it's not that easy to just
Yeah,
pick a backup.
it is. And then
And the
the
backup
backup
also
is
was infected.
Exactly. Yeah, like from 2 months ago or something.
And
So,
or the
so
backup
is
recovery.
the fundamental problem then that it's really difficult to have a reliable backup plan and restore mechanism that we can guarantee, as Oliver said, hasn't also been infected? It's a really difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
So when people start looking at it, they start looking at guides on how to do a backup plan. You're just like, oh, this is a lot. I'm just gonna hope, cross my fingers and hope that I don't need it.
Yeah,
That's a
so
really
this
good,
is
great
this is good.
recovery plan.
Yeah.
This could be a question for the next survey, because I do a lot of backups. All my customers have crazy backup routines, but I almost never restore the backup. And this would be a good question. How often do you actually restore a backup?
Right.
Because
Yeah.
like in 15 years, I did probably 2 times.
And the worst time to find out when your backup isn't working is when you need to restore it.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Good point.
So I'll just add a quick anecdote, and it'll sound, it's a very weird thing, but this is the state again telling you how people, and it's nothing to do with only WordPress. It applies to everything, all the software we use. Because software is so complex, and software is frankly overwhelming today for almost all of us. Is you come and I was talking to a really large customer of ours, and we went to them and we're like, hey, last year you switched over to our software, to Block Vault, our product. Why did you switch? And these are people with 900 plus sites.
Hmm.
And they were like, and we're like, was it because, and was it because you are able to back up like everything? And they're like, yeah, that was very important. Like you're the only ones who could back up everything. But the reason actually that's okay. The other software also could back up most of the sites. And the most is, people are perfectly okay with most. They don't need perfect. Oh, the reason why we bought you was because you guys are constantly making changes and we have access to you. So you can just see that uh, people have so much tolerance. Like what John is saying, people have so much tolerance. Like, oh, it's not working, it is fine. And it is just strange.
Yeah, in fact, kind of the next two statistics I have, we can join them in one, because roughly they all tie up with software is very complex in general, and also lack of awareness, because like the next statistic was like that we asked, like, on a scale from 1 to 10, how concerned are you about website security? And representatives scored their concern 7.8 out of 10. So on average, people are concerned. What's even more concerning is like, because then we asked, like, are you using security tools? And 65.9, which is 66%, say they use some sort of firewall. Again, we didn't go into detail which firewalls, but yeah, so they're using something. A very close 65% are using some sort of account security, like 2FA and password policies. So we have adoption of security software is quite high now. It's getting quite there. Yet people are still very concerned. 7.8 out of 10 are concerned about the security of their website. And yet a lot of websites are still getting hacked. So it's clearly, yeah, as you were saying, actually, no, it's software is complex. People don't know, kind of like they're not, awareness is not there yet, right? Maybe they don't know exactly what they have or what they should be doing, right? And as Oliver mentioned as well, you can go to a million articles, top 10 steps, top 10 tips. People get a bit overwhelmed as well. What do you think, Akshat?
Yes, no, one thing is, I will tell you that it is improving in terms of security. Software adoption is improving. And what was considered security earlier, people would install website hardening tools and think they are secure. Like they would do these ways of hardening their website, or I will change my user from admin and feel really secure.
SSL is my favorite.
Thankfully,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
yeah. So fortunately, those things are reducing. I don't have a statistics to say how much of they are reducing by, and people are adopting good firewalls. All of that is happening. So that is a good thing. I can anecdotally see that happening. You can see that from conversations. You can see that. I would not say it's universal. It's far from universal. So that is a good thing, right? The second part is, and I actually I want to make sure I cover one part, but the second part is, yes, so we are seeing security software improvement. People still have very poor sense of what is security. So you'll see that people will think that Cloudflare is good security for WordPress. Cloudflare is good security in some sense. Is it good security for WordPress? It is not.
Literally does nothing.
but,
Well, it does a little.
That's sort of
but people will spend an insane amount of money on Cloudflare, or web hosts will say, forget. So people doing it is one thing, but web hosts think that this is, oh, we have got Cloudflare.
Let's not bully Cloudflare, guys.
No, I'm not against. Cloudflare is really good security, but in a very specific dimension.
Of course.
Right? And I think Francisco mentioned, right, that it's stacked.
Layers.
Everything is.
It can be a layer of the stack. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, cloud. And the final part was, why are sites still getting hacked? See, there's one thing we should always remember is there's no such thing as perfect security.
Of course.
So unless you are going to disconnect your website, and even then it cannot be perfect security because someone can hold you at a gunpoint and hack your website. But the reality is there's no such thing as perfect security. You'll always have some level of hacks happening, and you'll always need to prepare for it. Is it too high? Yes. But there is no such thing as perfect security. You always have to prepare for that eventuality.
Of course, yeah, but the aim is to lower those numbers.
Yeah.
In fact, what are your thoughts, John? Because we have users who are really concerned. Security software adoption is really high as well. So, like, what's happening?
Yeah, well, you could argue that maybe it's better for that number to go up rather than down. 10 out of 10 people should be concerned about the security of their website. Point, yeah. I suppose when you say concern, does that mean that it's a consideration of their, is it an operational consideration or is it a worry? If it's a worry, of course, we want that number to go down. But if it's an operational concern, then we would rather that number is 10 out of 10 because everybody should, to some degree, especially if you're an administrator, rather, you should always be concerned about the security of your website. if you're not an admin, if you're just a regular user, or even if you're a business owner, maybe you're not directly responsible for the website, then ideally that number would drop. You shouldn't be your day-to-day concern that your website is always going to be hacked. That's the reason we have services like Patchstack that you can use to secure your website to reduce the worry. But certainly as an operational concern, you could argue that everybody should be concerned about their website security. Or, of course, the ideal utopia is that nobody has to worry about security because it's a non-issue. But I don't think we're ever really going to get to that point.
Good point. So what do you think, Francesco? I think it's quite clear. I agree with John as well, quite frankly. Like, technically, everyone should be concerned, but it depends on what level of concern. If you're just concerned because you're not sure what you're doing, that's one thing. But if you're concerned, oh, this might happen, but you know what you're doing, that's a different angle, right?
It's a different thing, especially because like 8 out of 10 people, admins, can be concerned, but still it boils down to what's security and what's their perception of security. Couple of examples. I've seen website companies with a website scanner, a vulnerability scanner, but they were not handling the alert. So you log in the scanner and you see you have unauthenticated cross-site scripting, you have SQL injection. So the results of the scanner are there, but they just don't understand or just don't care and don't patch them. It's not super common, but it happens. So like you say, okay, I have a vulnerability scanner, but if you are not actively doing something to patch the findings, you are not doing anything good for your security. One more example, custom code audits. So if we go check the thousands of security articles that say that get a secure hosting, do backups, how many of those articles tell like companies to audit custom code? Almost none of them. And actually, that's what I do most, like custom code audit. When I'm the first professional to audit a code base, I always find a lot of critical bugs and medium security bugs. Now, how many of those websites will be hacked by unknown security vulnerabilities in custom code? Maybe not a lot, because we know that most of the hacks come from known security vulnerabilities in plugins, but still the door is open. So that's the thing. You do a lot of things, but there is still a piece missing. And I did a couple of examples, but there would be many more. So admins may be concerned. This is good, but still, like, I think we already drawn a red line. Awareness. What is security? The security mindset and doing things with security in mind is different of doing things with operations in mind or just get things done. Are two completely different things.
Very good point. Oliver, your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, for sure. Like, I think I agree. Like, everyone needs to be concerned of security, and that is why I have this problem with many cases with security companies or hosts or whoever, essentially making like very bold security claims where they are kind of like pulling away this, like, we take care of your website, or like, we cover, like Akshat said, like there's no 100% security, it does not exist. So anyone who is promising that, walk very far away from that, right? But the problem is they're like, if you're promising security to the customers, what is going to happen is that they are not going to think about it. And this is the opposite of what you want to happen. We like the worry, like we should reduce the worry by the companies or people who run websites, that they know that they are doing something, that they are in the process of security, which is, ongoing process in general, but they should never like stop worrying about it, or like stop thinking about security in the sense like, okay, I installed this security sandwich, and then now, I don't need to think about this anymore because I slapped security on something and now it's done, right? So that is like the problem where I see very often where people are, for example, mixing up like performance and security, where in a sense, like you can solve performance in the way that you're like, installing, I don't know, caching plugin, and then suddenly all the performance for you is, you see like all the scores and now it's done, right? You don't need to think about performance anymore. But you cannot solve security the same way. And yeah, in that regard, like definitely there needs to be more, I think, thoughts on security. And like, we shouldn't think of, like, I've had a lot of these cases where like we work with a lot of hosting companies, right? So there's a lot of cases where hosts are like, I don't want, like, the customers expect us to do everything. They don't want to worry about security. Exactly, they don't want to worry about security, but they should.
Sure.
And that's every time when it comes down to exactly like for what Francesco said as well, is like everyone is covering like server level security, network level security, all these things, but like the attacks ultimately come from the application layer where the customer is on control. And now if we are basically telling the customer that you don't need to worry about security, then this one layer that is the most critical one is going to get completely, no attention whatsoever. So I think we need to show people, we need to talk more about vulnerabilities. We need to talk more about security in general. We need to talk more about breaches, and we need to show the users of WordPress where the risks are. And in fact, every agency that is building a website for their customer, who is not as one of the first things when they're building a website for the end user and not telling them what are the risks of becoming, like becoming online essentially, or like getting a website online, what are the security risks that come with that? I think that there's negligence in there. Like, I think every agency needs to basically communicate immediately to their customer what it means to have a website, that it requires both maintenance and both ongoing security. All we can do is like kind of like collectively, I think, just continue talking about that, because I think a lot more companies and need to really like put more attention on it.
Yeah, very good point. In fact, one thing that people have to understand, especially non-technical people, is security is not like a one fix thing, or install a plugin or apply for a subscription and it's done. It's always kind of evolving, especially if your website is changing, you've installed a new plugin, you've changed some functionality, then of course it keeps on changing. And yeah, talking about awareness, in fact, that's my next point. The one thing that strikes me from the survey is that only 25.8, which is 26% of the respondents, said they had done some sort of team training, as in received or given team training, which is again quite low. So, because we are talking about awareness, like of course as vendors, I agree 100%. We should do much more. We should make it maybe easier to use software, more awareness. But I think businesses themselves internally, if you look at big businesses, even like a simple 100 people business, you have a variety of technical people, but non-technical people as well. The accounts team, the whatever. Should there be done more in terms of training? At least, I'm not expecting someone who works in the finances to know how to manage a firewall, but at least they should understand what's a phishing email, what are the risks. As a user, you are also a target. What do you think? Who wants to start on this one? Francesco, what do you think?
I'll go with this one. So I completely agree with this, and it's not about like security training. Sometimes it's a misunderstood topic. So you don't have to learn how to set up a firewall or how to write a regular expression or any sort. It does anything to do with technicalities at some layer. It has mostly to do with the concepts, which are actually very important. That reminds me of one of most recent findings that I found on a website, which was actually not related to WordPress. So it was on a WordPress website, but the owner was plugging in an AI. We didn't talk enough about AI. An AI chat whose goal was to give the user information about the shipping on an order and the data. And so I asked, so how do I ask to this chat about the order information? Just insert the order number, the WooCommerce order number. And I was like, do you know that the WooCommerce order number is very guessable? I can just place an order, say what the order number is, and then guess the order before and later. They were like, really? So that was a data breach. If you install a third-party plugin, an AI, that a user can just give as an input an order ID and get the shipping status, the address, the amount, that's a data breach. I can run it on a scale with all the order IDs. That's a data breach. And that is something that could be prevented with security training. So understand that every time, the broad concept that every time there is an input, it has to be validated and it has to be taught where the input goes, what's the output of that input, what's the permission level to get the information. These are all basic concepts that have nothing to do with code or with bytes or with like tools. Don't know if that makes the point.
Yeah, it's logical vulnerabilities, not the actual technical software vulnerabilities.
Yes.
Which are actually the most dangerous ones in the WordPress ecosystem. Like when, we also deal with a lot of plugin vulnerabilities, like we process a lot of them, and the craziest ones are where you cannot you can't put them into OWASP top 10 even. Like you really need to do like some mind games to put them into like those categories. But there are vulnerabilities like that which just allow you to completely either get access to some sort of data that you were not supposed to get, or just completely bypass authentication or some system logics in general. And these are the things that are not unfortunately catched by your traditional security tools that are running WAFs and things like that. So
exactly, yeah, those are things that only the human intelligence kind of can understand. What is the impact of inputting something affecting an order or something like that? So yeah, John.
At risk of sounding like I'm repeating myself, the awareness is definitely the key word there. But again, I guess it also comes down to maybe priorities of a company. I can see that it's really easy for a small and medium-sized company to be focused on revenue and growth and making sure the company stays afloat, and hiring and marketing and finance, all the thousands of other things that a company founder is going to be more interested and more aware of, other than making sure that some random AI bot script that they've pasted on their website is actually secure. So again, if they're not aware of it, they're not going to prioritize it. If they're not going to prioritize it, then it's never going to get done. So it's certainly whatever route we take to looking at the problem, it comes back to awareness in one form or another.
Yeah. Akshat, do you see? Have you ever spoken to? Because I'm sure you did a lot of the end users who are managing the WordPress websites and the agencies. Do you come across people who give training or talk about these things that we're talking? Training their people?
Yeah, and again, it's I would say there's probably quite a heavy correlation between the size of the company versus how much they take things like staff training into account, or rather how seriously they take it. Because of course there's a cost aspect as well. If a company's going to be investing a lot into IT training for their staff, then it's going to affect their bottom line. So I can see that founders will be hesitant to spend that kind of money. So definitely a correlation there with our customers anyway. Larger companies, not saying all of them, because there's definitely not all of them, but they've definitely got formal processes in place more than smaller companies.
Something that I've realized also, what we are having a challenge with is everyone who comes to us and says that they're an agency, in many cases you take the paper bag out of their head, it's just one guy.
Yeah,
so
that's true. Yeah.
That is also something to take into account here in this data set.
I'm going to take the other side of the argument now. Because, and while I do believe in training, but just for the sake of, it's so easy to say, yes, do the training and things will be good. In fact, frankly, I don't think you can train people. And even if you do, most of the training which you do is wrong, because most of the information out there is so wrong. That is one part of it, and it is just the nature of it. And call me being cynical, but that's the reality of it. Again, what does training mean? Find good host, or find fixed make sure that the passwords are, or keep your WordPress websites updated. And those are good, important things. But is that sufficient? How much can you adhere to? What is the gap? What are the timelines? There are, like, it's such a sophisticated thing. So I genuinely believe that actually the answer should be opposite of training. Like, training is important and it is a part of it, but the reality is we have to build better technology. Windows used to get hacked left, right, center. Like, viruses were there, and they're still there, but they had to fix the technology stack behind it, right? So
It's
software has to be solved through technology, and you have to really invest in building the technology in the ecosystem across everything, and make it really easy for the user, that they can go about their lives normally. But if you are going to the our goal really, has to be, and that's what Patchstack is doing, that's what we are doing, that's what human made is doing, that's what, like, all of us are really doing in so many ways, that the amount of training you need, the amount of things you need keeps going down. And because the normal person, frankly, if they have to do the training, then they are going to adopt some other CMS over time. That's the reality of it.
Yeah, I think it's like everything. It's a package of everything. A bit of. Well, I agree with you. Actually, like if especially if someone's not technical, yeah, you can show them. I speak like some family members. You can show them a phishing email a million times, and they will still click on the link. Quite frankly, it's just
I think training only works when you put it together with processes.
exactly processes, automating for the user. Technology should improve, and then you have kind of like a complete package. So yeah.
But the thing is, like, no one is going to build the training. Nobody is going to build processes if they're not getting trained.
Exactly. Yeah. Good point. Good point.
Yeah.
And then the process.
At the same time, you cannot forget, like, the legacy that we have. So we know that WordPress itself has a lot of features that I don't want to call it insecure, but they can be used in an insecure way. And we need to bring them over for the democracy of the tool. So at that point, so you can have a huge, like, platform on WordPress and make everyone admin. You can do that.
Yeah.
You are not supposed to do that, but you can do that for a reason. So still, we always come back to awareness and, like, some training about why you should not make everyone admin. Sorry for the silly example. It has to be in place, especially if you don't have a security professional inside your team. So it's okay to have just a developer inside your team, a lead developer. But if that developer knows nothing about security, some training, it may be useful.
By the way, it's not a stupid example because I'm sure
Admin.
all of us about all of us have seen websites with 10, 20, 30 admins or all users.
I still have a website like that, and it's not easy to downgrade their permission because some plugins they like limit the features to admin. So it's not just you downgrade everyone and you are done. It's a tricky one. You have to work with custom permission. It's not an easy one.
Exactly. So
one of the features I would really love to get into WordPress is a kind of a pseudo mode. I know there's a couple of plugins that provide this feature, but maybe for users of GitHub, you might be familiar with this. If you go into your settings and try and change certain settings, you're re-prompted for your password or your 2FA code, just to make sure that you're definitely that user, or you're not being subject to some kind of phishing attempt or whatever. I think that feature in WordPress could go quite a long way to securing cross-site scripting vulnerabilities that pop up without any user interaction needed. So yeah, that's a feature on my wish list for WordPress.
nice.
Honestly, even like I would say, like, you should have that mode for every time you install a plugin. Because one of the things that is currently happening is with a lot of the security vulnerabilities where you can bypass authentication or basically get an admin access. And then there's vulnerabilities in the plugins that allow you to basically log in as an admin. Or, for example, when session cookies are being, basically stolen off of, infected devices, the first thing that is being done is to basically upload a plugin that would essentially act as a backdoor. So if you would have like basically that sort of mode where every time you are trying to install a plugin, you are being asked for re-authentication, I think the amount of malware we are seeing would most significantly drop by some degree.
In fact, I think that's one thing that many security professionals who are not in the WordPress ecosystem like look down on WordPress, because a plugin has full access right away to the WordPress it's not an operating system, it's an application, but yeah, it just has full access to the whole system, rather than there's no sorts of layers of what a plugin can do. Maybe it cannot affect the system or stuff like that.
It's definitely an architectural problem with plugins in WordPress. There's no concept of sandboxing.
Exactly.
It's like the old days of Android where there was no concept of sandboxing. You could install an app on your phone, it could just do anything. Of course, now we're entirely used to apps having different levels of access, and that doesn't exist in WordPress, which is a shame.
Yeah, no,
not sure we would ever be able to implement that.
So these are again two parts to it, right? I think one thing is these kind of protection. Again, we have tried to solve it at Malcare with our atomic firewall, where we do, for example, if you cannot escalate a user from who is not an admin to an admin, and even if a plugin has that vulnerability, you can patch it. So there aren't, so basically create restrictions like what John is saying through a specialized protection mechanism through technology. So what you do is what the limitations of the system is, try and cover that through technology. The thing I will tell you here is I think AI gives us some hope. It's not like the problem is AI is also the most dangerous thing that can happen to WordPress. So uh, in terms of security, so but AI can, for example, it can inspect a website, understand that there is a second admin sitting there not doing anything, and then go and reduce its permission or uh, so there are things like that you can build technology around to reduce the amount of thinking a person needs to do to maintain their website, because a business, their goal is to run their website, their goal is not to run security.
Yeah, the more we can, of course, it's a given. The more advanced technology becomes, the more we can do, of course, the more we are covering one of the most vulnerable parts in WordPress, which is the user themselves. Well, the user is always kind of like I wouldn't say at fault, but yeah, if you look at the most common hacks, like how they hit software, if I know, of course, you need to keep up to date with many websites, but it's also there's a human factor there. So
30% of the plugin vulnerabilities don't really get an update. So
wow, that's quite high. That's quite
it's quite a high percentage of vulnerabilities that are not getting patched either at all or in time. And the amount of abandoned plugins that we are sitting in the repo, I think, is only going up massively, because I think there was like some percentage of study just released as well, how many new plugins are being added into the repository and how many of them are basically generated with AI. So we're going to have quite a lot of work to do.
I can imagine. The last question about the survey, it's this a bit, Oliver, you can start, because of course you're talking a lot about the new EU regulations. So when asked about their biggest concern, users, like what's your concern if your website gets hacked, they were all concerned about downtime, data theft, loss, and reputation damage. Only 26% mentioned compliance, which compliance is also kind of, it works as the idea of compliance. We have compliance frameworks to help people have more secure websites. So if you technically worry about compliance, it's not a given, but it helps you get started with security. Is it like, are we overseeing compliance, or maybe people are scared of compliance? What do you think?
I think it's just like the most boring thing to think of. I think that is ultimately the reasoning behind it is like people just really don't want to think about compliance until they are essentially forced to think about it. We've been in Patchstack, like we've been running VDP programs for plugins. I think almost 1,000 plugins already are using our managed VDP platform, where they essentially, like, all the vulnerability reports go through, and the goal for that was to basically help plugin developers build processes around what in EU was created like a Cyber Resilience Act. So Cyber Resilience Act is essentially asking all plugin developers, actually also agencies who sell websites, because the websites are also becoming digital products in that regard, to follow certain security steps. Like you need like vulnerability management is mandatory. You need to report vulnerabilities forward to the European vulnerability database. You need to do a lot of the things have an SBOM. Basically, SBOM is an ingredient of what your website or what your plugin is made of, all the different software components and things like that. We started pushing this like two years ago already. Like this WordCamp EU, we even released like an AI-based vulnerability scanner that is looking for vulnerabilities, and we're expanding it to creating SBOMs and things like that. And honestly speaking, I feel like we're completely early in this game. Like nobody really cares. Like I can go on a stage on WordCamp EU like I did and talked about Cyber Resilience Act, and there's people like, oh yeah, this is very important topic, and yeah, thank you for telling us about it. And we do know that this regulation is going to hit everyone in the WordPress ecosystem hard in less than a year, but yet it feels still so far away. And as long as someone's hands are not getting squeezed, nobody's moving for compliance. So that is the unfortunate truth, is that people going after compliance is only the fines is what makes people become compliant, or commercial impact. Like, for example, if agencies are forced to be compliant and they cannot use plugins that are non-compliant, then plugin developers are becoming compliant because otherwise they are left out of business.
Exactly.
And things like that. So the commercial incentives is the only thing that I see that is moving compliance forward and making people care about compliance. So it's it's tricky.
Francesco, any thoughts about compliance?
Yeah, unfortunately, I deal quite a lot about compliance, and I agree with Oliver that we are in a very early stage, but I would add that also here there is a huge misunderstanding. So companies hire lawyers for compliance. They don't hire security professional or technical people. Because like what the message is, like, to be compliant, we need to have the paper in place. We have to declare how we handle the cookie, how we handle the data. But then if there is no some substance to what you write, nobody cares. We had a very recent example in Europe with whistleblowing law. Whistleblowing law is something about that if the company is bigger than, I don't remember, like 50 employees, it has to be a system. It must have a system to report anonymously security violation to the company. And when I say security, I'm not speaking only about code security or technical security, but also employee misconduct. You must have a system to report that. So they just like hire a lawyer or buy a software. Okay, we have this whistleblowing, we are compliant. Wait, you have to do that anonymously. Should we go check if you store the IP? Should we go check the encryption? Should we go check the access control to that report? I'm sure that there is no compliance there. So what I mean is that like compliance should be a technical topic, but nowadays it's a bureaucratic legal paperwork. So until we switch or we merge the two areas, there is no compliance to talk about.
Yeah, years and years ago, I think like 14, 15 years ago, I was a systems engineer for a software company, and we had a compliance audit. And as Francesco was saying, basically lawyers came with a checklist, and I could have shown them everything. Like, oh, do you have a firewall? Do you have these rules? Like, yeah, and whatever you show them, they had absolutely no idea what they're seeing. So it's like, so yeah, they have to kind of marry each other. John?
There's parallels to be drawn with compliance to accessibility laws. There's been a lot in the media lately about companies who, like snake oil salesmen, you can call them. They sell an accessibility solution. All you do is you sign up to our service for $100 a month, drop this piece of JavaScript on your website, and you can check off accessibility in your compliance checklist.
Same thing.
Yeah, it's exactly the same thing. And no doubt there's plenty of snake oil salesmen who will sell you exactly the same thing for security. You know, pay us for this solution, and you can check off security on your compliance checklist and keep your legal team happy. I will say as well that unfortunately there's quite a few solutions within the WordPress ecosystem that come pretty close to promising things that they can't deliver. Certainly there's security plugins that do well, and there's security plugins that don't do well. And quite often the ones that don't do well are the ones that promise too much. They say, this is the one solution, put it in place and your website is secure. And ultimately they succeed because there are people who need to check those checkboxes in their compliance checklist to demonstrate that they are compliant and they've done their job. And that's what it comes down to, is people demonstrating that they've done their job, they're compliant, and this solution does that, so we'll go with it. And the reality is, of course, that being really compliant requires a lot of domain knowledge, and it requires consultancy and a lot of deeper understanding, and it's a difficult and expensive thing to do.
Yeah, very good point. I agree. Akshat, what do you think?
Well, I think they've covered everything that's in there. I think Robert, you should add compliance, because you see compliance so much with activity log, audit trails being such a key part of compliance.
Yes, we think it's only part of it, but yeah, I mean, I agree with all of you. It's just most cases I've seen, unfortunately, it's more about checking that box, making someone happy in the legal team, more than anything, which is unfortunately, maybe people don't understand the implications of it. But yeah, that's the reality when it comes to compliance so far. Hopefully, slowly it will change. Maybe because of what Oliver and Francesco said, and also as John said, like, you need to be knowledgeable with that domain. You cannot just go, oh, PCI, okay, let's start. You need to read a lot, you need to learn, and there's so much to it. So yeah, unless it could also be because the people who develop these frameworks are not necessarily technical, so they try to come up with some blanket rules that cover every type of website on the internet, and that makes it very difficult for us technical people to translate that and make it into an actual practical solution. What should we do? So yeah, maybe the closer we get together, the legal and the technical, hopefully that will solve a lot of issues. Thank you all for sharing your knowledge and insight. That's it about the survey. I really appreciate it, your insights. Before we end this panel, I have 2 questions left. A specific question for each of you, starting with Oliver. Oliver, at Patchstack, you deal a lot with web hosts, and you have spoken also as well about some podcasts and online sessions. Is there like one big thing that web hosts can do to help their users maintain their website secure?
I would say the number one thing is to let the customers even know that they have a security issue in the first place. That's what we are seeing the most, is that there are tools available. Like, we are helping hosts right now as well to make it completely free for the end users to at least know that their applications are vulnerable. So they would know that they need maintenance and they would need to have some level of security in place in the first place. I think that is literally the number one thing. I think when we're talking about managed WordPress hosting in that regard, like what do you manage in that sense, then ultimately managed boils down to security. You need management because of security. And the number one thing that I think every single hosting company should have is the visibility for the end users, for them to even understand that there is security to be even covered. Because that's the first step where the users would even be able to get to a point where, like, okay, I made a website, I'm hosting it here, it has security vulnerabilities in software that I didn't update. Maybe there's my own responsibility in keeping my website secure. And I think that is the first step, and for the hosting companies to kind of like stop taking the blame for everything, and kind of like getting rid of this illusion that hosting company is covering all the security of every application that they host. It's just impossible. And I think that's pretty much it.
Very good. Thanks a lot. Akshat, at Malcare, you deal mostly, of course, with end users and agencies, a lot of agencies. What is the most common security problem you are seeing, and kind of what can be done to tackle that problem?
The most common security problem is actually it continues to be the number one problem continues to be not updating your plugins. All things said and done, while we have had all this complex conversation, the reality is not updating your plugins and is your number one problem, and it is the most insecure thing that you are doing. Like, I know it sounds trite, but it is the reality, and it is the single best thing you can do to secure your website. Like, we have data, the data clearly shows it, and it's painful to do it, but it is the most important thing. So do it more often. It is painful, but do that work. I know it's stupid, but yeah, that's the one.
But I think by the just point for everyone, this is not just about WordPress, it's about everything. You're using a smartphone, everyone should keep their apps up to date, their OS up to date, their laptop OS. It applies for any type of software, quite frankly. Thanks. Francesco, you deal with a lot of plugin code, of course. What is the most common security problem you are seeing, and what can be done? Like, just one tip to help developers address this.
Well, I agree with Akshat. Like, updated plugins is still nowadays the number one reason for security issues. So I would say update plugins, but also user accounts and password policies. I've seen a lot of weak passwords, and that can be fixed with the password scanner and so on and so on. I would not go deep in that, but understanding the permission level, securing accounts, double-factor authentication, password policies are a weak point that can be addressed with technology and awareness. One more thing that I would add about plugins is that most of the times, as far as I see, this happens because agency or developers or whoever built website thinks to it as a one-shot project. So I build a website, I deliver, I get paid, end of the game. At the opposite, at least me, I maintain a few websites, but I see it as an ongoing process, not only about security, but about like performance optimization, new features. So as long as there is someone that maintains website and takes care of the plugins, the website will stay healthy. So maybe if like operators understand the value of like bringing customer along with their journey and keep updating the plugins and taking care of the website, this KPI can improve.
Okay. Thanks. And John, you work for Human Made, but you're also the WordPress security team lead. What can the WordPress core team do to help the community? You already mentioned the sudo, of course, which is a great idea. Any other ideas? How can the WordPress core help deal with address these issues?
Yeah, there's definitely a list of priority features that I would like to get into WordPress core with relation to security. What I will do is I'll mention one that's a lot less noticeable, but is actually very widely exploited, which is when a user registers a new domain name and they get a HTTPS certificate for the website. Those go into public logs now, and there's quite a lot of attacks rather on new websites that have been scanned via these the security certificate logs, and the sites get hacked before WordPress has even been installed, because you generally get your certificate before you can access and set up your website. So there's this point in time where your website can get hacked while it's still waiting to be installed. The first thing you do is you go to your website and the WordPress installer pops up. And it's actually really widespread, but there's nothing in WordPress that really protects you against that. a lot of the time people are using one-click installers on web hosts so that problem kind of doesn't really exist. But in all the other instances where you're not, there's this time frame where a website can get hacked. There's a few things we can try and do in WordPress core, and I would like to do around that. And unfortunately, there's always a trade-off between the user experience of just being able to click a button versus having to put some kind of configuration variables in place. So that's an interesting one that I would like to look at solving. Try and stop the websites getting hacked before they've even been installed in the first place.
Very interesting. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, for your time. And yeah, hopefully we'll see next year. We'll see better numbers. Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
If you want to dive deeper into these insights, check out the full Melapress WordPress Security Survey linked in the description. And don't forget to subscribe for more tips on WordPress security and managing your website like a pro.